This is my new 62-year-old computer. It has a paper tape punch, a paper tape reader, a CRT, an immensely heavy Frieden Flexo writer, and this box right here is filled to the brim with transistors and one of the wildest memory systems in this room. It has a memory disk. This machine is, first of all, beautiful. The teal and cream color perfectly encapsulates the aesthetic of the late 1950s, early 1960s. But because it's so long, you'll notice that the room has changed quite considerably to get this thing in here. And actually, where did this thing even come from? Well, that is a pretty fun story. Our story begins nearly a year ago when Tom Jennings made a post on Mastodon. I was actually in Dubai at the time and my phone started blowing up at like 3 a.m. But I woke up, looked at the Mastodon post, and what Tom had posted was this very machine. It is a 1963 Librascope LGP-21. And Tom was looking to maybe donate it to somebody who would actually take a swing at getting it going again, which is exactly why this machine is here and exactly what we're going to do. Now, Tom is an amazingly interesting person. He created FidoNet, which is a very important part of computing history, but also he's the mastermind behind some really stunning art projects, and he cruises around in a 1960 AMC Rambler two-door wagon, which is just epic. I had an absolute blast chatting with Tom, but the problem is that Tom lives in Los Angeles and I live in Central Texas, and that is a very long ways away. So I needed to get out to Los Angeles with an SUV to pick it up in person. And right around that time, Steve and Mickey over at the Vent Nerd reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in attending VCF SoCal, which was happening in mid-February in 2025. A plan was starting to form, so I reached out to Tom and I asked him if he wouldn't mind holding on to the machine until February of 2025. And he said, sure, no problem. I've had it for 20 plus years. It's not going anywhere. And then came the months-long wait of waiting for February to roll around. But when it did, I loaded up in an SUV and set out on what would be a 2,700-mile road trip around the western United States. So I made a beeline straight for Los Angeles, and I actually arrived a little early. That's because I had some close friends who live in LA that I needed to visit. The first was a good friend of mine who goes by the online nickname of Dotsmo. If you're into old Datsuns or old Nissans, he's got some pretty stunning machines, but also I've known Dotsmo for well over a decade. We were close friends back when I was living in Japan, and it was really good to see him and hang out again. The very next day, I met up with another close friend of mine, Sam Matani, and I actually have 3 of his books right here. This is a trilogy, The Prototype, Red Mist, and Keys to the Empire. And I can't recommend these books enough. This is just really awesome to see, but also, if you look in the back of Red Mist or Keys to the Empire here, you will actually find my name. I did a little bit of pre-copy editing and double checking of these novels. Sam sent me very early drafts. And so, Sam, if you're watching, it was an absolute pleasure to be a part of this journey. Thank you so much for that. Anybody else who's watching, go check out Sam. I'm not sponsored. I'm just, when my friends do stuff that I think is absolutely stunning, I want to sing their praises because this is really cool. But after I met Sam, it was time to go out and meet Tom. And I drove out in the pouring rain and got to hang out with Tom, and it was just a ton of fun. Tom is one of the coolest individuals I've had the pleasure to sit down and chat with. He's built some unbelievable projects over the years and has an insane collection. But ultimately, we loaded up the LGP-21 into the SUV, and I shook Tom's hand and said, thank you for the wonderful day. And Tom, if you're watching, thank you for the wonderful day. And I set back off for the hotel. The very next day, I had a little bit of time to kill because load-in didn't start until 5 o'clock. So I met up with my buddy Rick and we went out to the Marconi Automotive Museum where we saw some really cool cars. And then we jumped over to K1 Speed where I absolutely crushed it with consistent lap times. This is an indoor go-karting arena and I am hooked. There's one up in Dallas and I know that I am going to be spending some time there every time I'm up that way. But at 5 o'clock, load-in started at VCF SoCal and I got this LGP-21 all set up right at the entrance where they had me slated and we were getting ready to start the show. Now, once Saturday rolled around, the show was going in earnest and the turnout was pretty amazing. It was really great seeing so many people excited to see these old machines. Right behind me was my buddy Rick, and he had a awesome setup of how to do Xilinx FPGA shenanigans the proper 90s way. But of course it was getting late in the day by the time I was filming, so the 286 was doing double duty as a Doom machine. Next to Rick was one of the wilder exhibits at the show, just a stunning collection of cell phones throughout the early years. There was also this wonderful display of early handheld computers, but it's not all show. Most everyone had machines set up to use. Southern Amos had a lovely collection of Atari equipment out, and he even had my all-time favorite Atari on display, the XEGS. Just look at its excellent pastel colors. VCF is also all about helping each other keep these machines going as well. I love seeing exhibits like this one that teach the intricacies of board level repair. I also love seeing homemade projects like this. Just give it a shake and it generates a random number to display on the Nixie tubes. It's powered by a tiny microcontroller with a boost converter to power the absolutely stunning Nixie tubes on top. The same legend was behind a ton of cool one-off projects, like this minuscule viewfinder CRT seen here booting Linux off a Raspberry Pi, as well as this Sony Watchman that has been modified to become the Scope Man. It's essentially drawing an XY pattern, just like an oscilloscope. He's feeding it a unique audio pattern to draw shapes on the screen. It's so easy to get completely enraptured by one exhibit that it's a good thing the event is 2 days long. Oh, and I hope 15 kilohertz whine doesn't bother you because here at VCF, it's CRT heaven. Like this hilariously awesome wall of CRTs or these TVs showcasing new games by Monsoon Studios. It's impossible to rate the exhibits because they're all just so awesome, but I'm gonna anyway. Coming in as third best exhibit is none other than the amazing Jerry Ellsworth. She came with some forgotten business machines from the 80s, and y'all know me, I love me some quality business machines. I had a hard time getting footage of her exhibit though because there was a steady stream of people checking it out. Coming in second was a legend whose name I forgot to write down with some awesome home-built machines. This relay machine was clicking and clacking away in true electromechanical beauty. And this LGP-30 on an FPGA was brilliant to see. Aside from being a great way to get hands-on with an extremely rare LGP-30, the contents of the simulated drum was actually shown on screen. And of course, I felt like I was suddenly in a Curious Mark video with this replica Disky. And in first place is none other than difficult computing with an out-of-this-world Silicon Graphics Onyx 2. Now, I'll be the first to admit that this is a bit of a surprise, especially coming from the guy who had the oldest machine on display by a good 10 years. But this SGI machine is an absolute stunner. It is packed to the gills with serious hardware for some intense graphic processing. There are four 400 MHz IP7 processors working side by side, floating point unit, 8 GB of RAM, 3 SCSI hard drives, and a graphics system powerful enough to embarrass machines 10 years newer. But more than the machine was the man behind it, sporting an SGI hat, an SGI t-shirt, and sitting down to use the SGI keyboard and mouse on the custom-made SGI mousepad. He was 100% the type of person that I love meeting at these events. So thank you, sir, so very much for bringing this stunning machine out. But all good things must come to an end, and after packing the LGP up into the SUV, I set out for Phoenix to swing by for an epic day with Shelby from Tech Tangents. If you don't know about Tech Tangents, go check them out immediately. Shelby does amazing work, and I don't know how he does it, but he makes regular YouTube videos and streams on Twitch multiple times a week. Shelby's work ethic is on another level. And speaking of work, I arrived with an entire day set aside to help get some work done. We hopped on Twitch and YouTube Live, pulled out the data general equipment, and after 6.5 hours of streaming, we had some pretty epic progress done on some really special equipment. The entire 6.5 hour stream is available on Shelby's YouTube channel, Tech Tangents, but Shelby is also editing together a more focused, shortened version of the stream, which he'll be uploading to the same place. Link to both his YouTube channel and Twitch channel below. And Shelby, if you're watching, thank you so much for having me over. That was just one of the best days of working on stuff I've ever had. It was so much fun, and I had an absolute blast. So thank you very much, sir. But after setting out from Phoenix, I had to make one more stop up in Albuquerque, where I visited another car buddy of mine. Then I made the long trek back home to Central Texas, where I had a new problem on my hands. How on earth was I going to fit the LGP-21 in the room? Well, the only thing to do was to just get to work. I asked y'all a bit about this last week, and the #1 response was, get a bigger room. Well, yeah, that's obvious, but I don't have enough zeros in my bank account for that. And also, I don't think that's the right solution. The room in its previous state was too chaotic. There were projects on display that I hadn't powered on in over a year, and I felt like my attention was being pulled in 100 different directions. Those that didn't suggest just getting a bigger room had some really amazing feedback. You were all absolutely right. If something was not an active project, it needed to go. So things like the Mini Centurion, TI-99-4, NEC PC-8001, and Zilog Z-8000 were all moved out of the room. Once I had the Bendix G15, LGP-21, and Data 620 in place, I really waffled on how to arrange the rest. But ultimately, I think it really started to come together very well. Of course, while I'm rearranging, I desperately need to organize my bookshelves. So everything came out, got organized or put into boxes, and then sorted back into the most appropriate places on the shelves. And the room really came together more amazing than I could have ever hoped. So what all has changed? Well, the Centurion mini computer hasn't changed at all, and that was always the plan. This is my forever machine, and it's gonna stay right here. But I did spend some time with the bookshelf behind it. It was in a sad state of affairs, and it needed a whole lot of cleaning up, and it looks so much better now. But things have changed quite considerably over here. The shelf that used to have the TI-99 train on it has been sliced, and the TI-99 has left the building. In its place, we have the two machines that I really wanted to keep together. A PDP-1173 with a massive vector processor on the side of it, with the appropriate Princeton monitor and keyboard that go with it, as well as the Data General Nova 1210 and Model 43 teletype with tape drive here on the side. Both of these machines were controllers for some kind of spectrometers. The 1173, I believe, controlled a helium neon laser spectrometer for BOMIM, and the Nova 1210 was used with some EDAX X-ray spectrometers. Right next to all that is the PDP-1144. Now, it's just changed position and nothing really has changed on it, but there are some large-scale changes for it coming, and that's something we're going to get into in a future episode. But let's walk over to the other corner of the room and take a look at what's changed over there. Now, just off camera is this bookshelf right over here, which got a ton of reorganization done on it, but this whole side of the room looks wildly different. Now, the Bendix G15 had to live here because this is where the socket for it is. Remember, this thing pulls 42 amps, so it needs a 50 amp breaker at 120 volts. It's a pretty unique thing that we had to wire up in this corner. So the Bendix G15 couldn't move, and neither was the UE1. But the typewriter for the G15 has changed from below the UE1 over to here. Now, it looks like this room is maybe a little Spartan or barren, but that was actually by design. I left some space here for expansion. Notably for the UE1, we're gonna start working on its successor. I don't really know what it's gonna be called yet. UE2 maybe, UE8 maybe, but its successor is gonna live right below it. So I now have secured some space for that. When this G15 goes back up to Bob at System Source Museum, I'm hoping another G15 comes down. That G15 is an alphanumeric machine, which means that this typewriter is also going to go up to System Source Museum, and a different typewriter is going to come down, one with a more reasonable platen size. Now, if we get a smaller platen on here, that opens up a bit of space, so I'm hoping I can convince Bob to send down a magnetic tape unit for the Bendix G15. But that would really round out this corner a lot better, I think. So you have G15 tape drive and then the specific smaller typewriter for it. Now off to this side of it, we have the Data 620 in the corner and this ASR33. I forgot to mention in the previous episode that the ASR33 has to stay because it's the primary teletype for the Data 620. It's the only way to load programs in, it's the only way to store software out of it, and it's the only input-output method that we have for that machine. And we're gonna get into that machine really soon. But since we've looked at everything else, let's take a look at the LGP-21 next. Now the Zilog Z8000 system and the NEC PC 8001 have both departed and left the room, but interestingly, a system that a lot of people recommended also having leave the room was the Litton mini computer at the end. But once I parked it next to the LGP-21, I realized it had to stay. Also, I really like it. It's a fantastically cool machine. Also, it really helps round out this corner of the room. We have 1956, 1965, 1963, and 1969. This is such an awesome angle of computing history that the Litton had to stay. Now coming this way, we get to the beautiful LGP-21 that looks stunning with its teal and cream color. It is effectively split up into 4 sections though. At the far end, we have the paper tape punch, and there is black paper tape in this. And I believe that they chose black specifically for the same reason that Bendix uses black or blue tape. And that's because right next to it is the optical tape reader. And having a dark paper tape helps you get sharper transitions between zeros and ones as that paper tape flies by at high speed. Now, right on top of the paper tape reader is the CRT. I believe this is just going to show essentially the values of 3 registers, and I think it's going to trace it across similar to how an oscilloscope would trace it. Coming one step closer, we have the LGP-21 branded table. It is just a table, and it's a little worse for wear, but it is the proper table that comes with this machine. And right on top of it is the Frieden Flexo writer. It also has an LGP-21 badge on it. Now, I'm pretty new to Flexo writers, but this is an incredibly complex thing. There's so much going on inside of it, but we did actually have this Flexo writer plugged into an outlet, powered on and running. It was able to actually type some letters on paper. A lot of other things seemed kind of locked up, so we didn't want to run it for very long because I think I'm going to need to take it somewhat apart and make sure that everything is free and clear and moving. I also need to get a look at how it's wired up. There's a massive Canon connector on the side of it that has to ultimately plug into this unit here, and I don't know the pinout of that. So I need to kind of take it apart, take a look at it, and also dig through some of the documentation because I did get a book that has all of the schematics for this machine in it. And I think that's going to be paramount to getting it going. But this unit to my left right here is the CPU. This is the heart and brains of the entire operation. And the top to it opens up like a massive clamshell. How cool is that? It's on these little pegs that we can just slide right off. And then the whole top comes straight off and we can see some really cool stuff here. So let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. This memory disk right on top. There are a boatload of fixed heads located all the way around it. And we're trying to figure out what they do, but I'm still not entirely sure. As best as I can figure out, you have 4 collections of 9 heads. Here, 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 and here. Now, the 9th head of each of these collections is not wired up, so you technically only have 8 heads wired up with 4 spares, and I believe these heads are interleaved, so none of them overlap with each other. So that gives you 32 lines of data around here that you can use for storage. Now, this group of heads right here, I haven't figured out exactly what it does. It goes to its own separate plug here and doesn't seem to be involved with anything else. Around the periphery, we have these interesting things that say read amp on them. There's 4 of them all the way around, and there's actually read-write heads underneath these as well. These are actually the registers. You have the accumulator register, the extended accumulator register, the control register, and the instruction register. They're located on separate tracks around the periphery of the disk. Really fascinating and stunning design. And you can see that all of the control for it is done on this really tall PCB that stands vertically on the edge here. But the rest of the computer PCBs are underneath this panel right here. There are 5 massive PCBs plugged into the backplane here, but there are 8 slots total. Near as I can tell, the backplane looks like it's completely universal, so any PCB should be able to plug into any slot, but that's something we're gonna have to confirm much later on. Now, I believe that the extra slots are for extra expansion. If we look on the back, there's a bunch of knockouts here that haven't been knocked out, and that could allow you to expand to more flexo writers or maybe a different type of punch or anything like that. But as far as I know, this machine is complete, and the PCBs are absolutely stunning. You can see they have nothing but metal can transistors on them. There's not a single integrated circuit anywhere in here. However, there are a lot of germanium diodes. Not as many as I was expecting, but still enough for it to be a bit of concern. And on the Bendix G15, we had about a 2% failure rate, which is really amazing for something that's, 60, 70 years old. But also that's a 2% failure rate. So trying to figure out if those are good or not is going to be a bit of a challenge on this one. But it is complete, it is very clean, and I think it should come up with pretty minimal effort. Saying minimal effort is a bit disingenuous. This is a fully transistorized computer from 1963, and bringing it up is going to be a massive amount of effort, and it's going to be a very long project. But we do have a couple of aces up our sleeve. As I mentioned earlier, I have this manual right here. This has all of the logic diagrams and schematics for the machine in it, as well as a wonderful chapter on theory of operation and general specifications about it. This is our holy grail. However, if we do actually get it up and going, what can we run on it? Well, that's a bit of a problem because there isn't any known surviving LGP-21 code out there. However, I do happen to have this binder here as well, which is full of code written by none other than Melvin K, the Mel from the Story of Mel, but it's all written for the LGP-30. Now, the LGP-21 is a transistorized, cost-reduced version of the LGP-30. However, I don't think the code is completely cross-compatible. But we should be able to port Melvin's code here from this notebook to the LGP-21. We just have to understand the differences between the 21 and the 30, and maybe we can write a script to help automate that change. But we should be able to build new code from this, which is pretty exciting. And that raises the question of when is all of this going to happen? And this is the hard part. I really am excited about getting this machine here, but I'm not going to be able to get to it for probably a year because I want to focus on this Data 620 behind me first. We got it about a year ago, and when we pulled it into this room, I said it would be about a year before we got to it. It has been a year. It's time to get to it. That's coming up this month, hopefully. And we're gonna start trying to work on getting that Data 620 going. Once we either hit a brick wall with it or we get some really notable progress done, then we'll shift focus over to this LGP-21. So I know I'm introducing a brand new machine for you guys today, but please keep in mind it's gonna be a while before we can get to it because we got to wrap up some other really awesome projects, notably the G15, the Data 620, and there's some other stuff that I really want to get my hands on as well, like the Nova and the PDP-11. So the room got a massive rearrange. We ended up with this absolutely gorgeous LGP-21, and I had a wonderful trip around the United States visiting some excellent people. So I know we didn't really work on anything today, but, well, I mean, we rearranged the entire room. That was a lot of work, but we didn't work on a specific machine today. But I want to thank you guys so much for tagging along on this story of acquiring this gorgeous machine, and I hope to see you in the next episode.